Hi there, Chris here with another fresh tip for you all. In this video we are going to continue our look at painting Sigvald the Magnificent, Prince of Slannesh, and in this video we're going to work on his base. As you can see, I had the base left all separate from the rest of the model, giving it a prime of Stynorez light gray, using an airbrush, Patriot 105, spraying it around 20 some psi, around 20 or 30 psi. Get things started, we're going to use some Naggaroth Night from Citadel. This is the regular Citadel variety, it's not the Air. I'm using a Patriot 105, added a bit of thinner to this paint just to thin it out ever so slightly. Really was more like kind of a 2-to-1 kind of mix ratio for anybody who's concerned about that. And with that, basically, we are going to apply this as a base coat over the entirety of the base. Majority. I mean, I left that little icon there kind of, in prime because why not? I'm going to use some Administratum Gray, Citadel Air variety. I'm going to use a Renegade Chrome from Badger to apply this, as it is a finer needle. I took the PSI down to about a little less than 20 PSI, and it was a fairly generous amount of thinner, as I do want this color to flow very, very thin as I'm applying it to the surface of the model, so that I can slowly build up to the desired result and allow some of the purple to shine through some areas in the shadows and things of that nature. For the most part, I'm spraying pretty much straight down at the base, so I'm not working too many funny angles or anything like that, as again, I want to have purple residing within the shadows of the rock and everything like that in the dirt. And at this point, I was kind of thinking of, I don't know, I'm just gonna have it mostly purples and everything like that. But then once I was kind of like looking at how it all played out onto the model, with the model involved, because the model has a lot of gold and red, I kind of wanted it to play a little bit nicer with that. So as I'm slowly building up the color as I'm working my way around, you can see here, again, I'm trying to maintain the angle of spraying kind of straight down. And again, because I have it in a very thinned out consistency, I can slowly build up to the desired result. And you can see there's a little bit more gray spread out around. That's because I was spraying at a little bit higher distance and just getting some more even coverage. I'm going to add a little bit of White Scar Citadel Air to this mixture. It's probably closer to 1-to-1. Added a bit more thinner to it just to thin it out again, just so I can slowly build up to the desired result. And with this application of color, I'm being a little bit more choosy about where I'm applying it. So I'm applying it more towards the center of the face, top of the column, and the little stepping stones. I'm kind of just highlighting basically one portion of the stone just to give some visual interest. And, it's not really a light sourcing kind of thing. I had considered doing a light sourcing on the base, but I decided against that as well. And so basically it's just a basic straight up application of color onto the surface. Again, majority of the gray does cover over a lot of the purple initially, but that's fine. I'm not too worried about that. It was just really the base. Basilicum Gray is next, and this is Citadel Contrast. I throw about 3 or 4 drops onto the palette and add about 4 or 5 drops of medium to this to really kind of thin it out. So ratio wise, it's kind of like a 1-to-1, but it's probably more medium than it is color. And with this, I'm using a shade wash brush to apply this. Anywhere where it kind of pulls up a little too heavily, I simply just draw the excess out and move the color away from those surfaces. On the big broad portions of the face itself, I do pull some of the color off of that. I really wanted it more for those stones there with all the little tile work going on, so I just wanted to create more separation there. But otherwise, it's a fairly generous application over the entirety of the details of the base itself. Set it aside, allow it to dry, and we're going to come in with some Praxetti White. This is Citadel Dry. I'm going to use a large Citadel dry brush for this. You can see here I've taken a fairly generous amount onto the brush, wipe a majority of it off, like 90%. If you really need ratios there. And with a very gentle hand, I begin moving the bristles across the surface. Now on the face here, I concentrate mostly on the nose and the upper portion of the face. On the stones themselves, I pretty much work the entirety of the base. That little broken statue on the back, I also catch some of the areas in the elbows. It's not so much kind of, dry brushing like to, create too much light sourcing. It's really just to catch just edges of details. I'm only looking for a subtle highlight on those areas. I'm not looking to build up intensity of color or anything like that. I'm just looking to catch edges and basically define all those details on the base. And that's really just the whole point of finishing off with just this dry brush. Next, we're going to jump into some Flesh Terrors Red, this Citadel contrast. Slap a little bit onto the palette, and I'm also going to take a generous amount of water. I'm going to thin this out with just some water. I'm not going to bother with the mediums because I really didn't feel it necessary at this point. And with this, I'm going to apply this over the little tiles on each of the little stone parts. I don't know. Again, I was kind of making this up, and I also wanted to kind of help transition back into the colors that are on the model itself. So that's why we're going with this red, because I want this red to kind of reflect with the model as well, so it plays all kind of nicely, and the base ties into the model. Again, we could have went with completely different colors and done something completely different, but again, because this model was done in sub-assemblies, it actually is kind of something to bear in mind when you are working on a model like this and you're trying to do a fairly good job on it. That when you are working in sub-assemblies, you kind of have to remain in the headspace of how all your colors are going to play with each other and how they're all going to look. Here, once that first layer is dry, I'm simply just building up some more color in that darker area. So it's kind of giving us a bit of a color gradient on each of these stones. And again, it's not really to a particular kind of lighting scheme or anything like that. It was just more for visual interest, just kind of, darkening one side and keeping one side light. Here on the eyeballs, I simply just fill in the eyeballs with the color and just let it saturate heavily in those areas. XV88 from Citadel. I'm pretty sure this color is still widely used. Basically, we're going to use our wash brush here and begin applying this over the rim and along the edge of the base. And as I was applying it, I was like, you know what? Let's change up the sand a little bit, the sand debris that is around the rest of the base. And so I decided to push the color about like a millimeter or two up the surface, and I thought, it'd be kind of fun to let's just transition a little bit of color upwards into the sand detail, so it kind of has a bit of a blend, like the sand is part of whatever the environment is, and of course it's also a mixture of like the dirt and debris of the statue and all this ruin and everything like that. Really, it's kind of just making up whatever reasons you want for having these colors to transition through each other. And again, as I do that, I also add a bit of water to the color, so it's really, really thin. You can see a lot of the base color kind of showing through as I apply it around the sand closest to the actual base itself. And then here I'm taking a little bit more thin color and basically just changing the overall value around some of the sand. And I'm just kind of scrubbing it in, and I'm not really that concerned with evenness or anything like that, because again, it's kind of random. It's like, representing a mixture of the sand and the statue debris and this environmental sand. I think you guys kind of get what I'm doing there. Here is another layer applied to the rim and also to reinforce the color at the kind of where the details meet up with the rest of the base. Just kind of solidify color and again help with that gradient of this light purple gray that's blending into this earth tone as we work our way through. And again, here I'm just reinforcing some of those colors, and here we are just simply scrubbing it in along that edge and just reinforcing that color, getting a nice bright definition going along those edges there. Again, once I had laid this color down, it doesn't really show here on camera, but because of the really warm quality of the sand, it actually plays very interestingly with the purple gray that we have going on with the rest of the details. It actually makes that kind of jump out a bit more because there's that slight yellow cast from the XV88. So I thought that was kind of fun there. Wraithbone is next. I'm going to slap a little bit onto the palette, just the dampness of the brush to really just to thin the color out ever so slightly, and we're going to catch all the little skull bits and skeletons and things like that. This is just really, really kind of rough, kind of slapping this on. If you've thinned the paint out a little too much, you will have to apply more than one layer. It is a base color, so it does cover very, very quickly, and it becomes very opaque really, really fast. So I really recommend working with it in a thinned out consistency and then just apply multiple layers, which is what I do. Next, we're going to take Skeleton Horde from Citadel Contrast. This is a really fantastic way of, and quick way of doing bone on miniatures or anything that has kind of like a bone-like detail. And with this, I just apply a fairly generous amount onto the model and move the color around and let it pool up into recesses and, in the temple area and around the jawline and all these areas where, we like to have shadows fall. And again, I also apply some as we do another layering, I believe. I also apply some around the sand as well, just to deepen up some of the color and just help, transition some of these areas where it goes from this XV88 towards that gray purple. Next, we're going to go with some Terminus Stone. And basically with this, we're using a medium dry brush here. I'm going to catch some of the skull details, but I'm also catching some of the sand as well, because I just want to bring out some of that texture. It just feels a little bit too flat. I didn't want to add a shade wash to the XV88 tones, as I want that just to primarily work as the the shadowy color. And here I'm just catching some of the other little points on the sand, again because this is a lot brighter than that pure mixture that we had when we were applying it by airbrush earlier. It brings out a lot more of those little details. And again, I'm not too worried if I hit other areas of the model as well, because the very light white gray works just fine. Corn Red is next, and this is just for the eyeballs. I had considered catching the little tiles on the blocks that run further along the base, but I decided against that, as it the color works just fine, and there's there's a gradient there. And I initially had considered creating like an OSL effect in the eyes and create a glow and maybe something glowing up on Sigvald, but I decided against that as time constraints and things of that nature. Wazdaka Red is next, and this is basically just going to be a little edge highlight. And as I was kind of highlighting this, I was realizing that it kind of looked like cat eyes, and so I kind of just played with that and concentrated more of the color in towards the center of where basically the iris would be. And I didn't really paint it in such a fashion that it would look like an iris, but it just kind of ends up looking that way, and I was fine with that, and I was okay, whatever. We're jumping back into some Skeleton Horde, and this is just to reinforce some of the shadows, create a little bit more separation for those bone details. And of course, you can see here I'm just running along some of the XV88 details where it kind of marries up next to the gray and everything like that. And again, I'm just kind of picking out areas. I'm moving it kind of randomly, letting it pool up a little heavily here and there, but otherwise just simply getting a kind of a mottled effect on that surface. I'm not really looking for anything too clean or anything too spiffy. It's just pretty much, it's dirt and ground, right? And of course, this is a mixture of debris and ruins and, things of that nature. So again, I wasn't terribly consumed with, making sure that it all looks really great. Agrilian Earth is next, and we're going to use our Citadel spatula tool, the texture brush as it's called, I believe. And with this, I'm just using that broad end and then coming in with the narrow end of it. And this tool works out pretty well for doing this kind of work, and I'm fine with using this kind of tool. Again, you can use something like a toothpick or, the back of a brush, or, there's all sorts of ways to apply this heavy material. I simply use my finger to wipe the excess away. I'm not too worried if the color changes the rim of the base, because again, we're going to just come in and clean that up afterwards anyway. So I just go around the entire perimeter of the base, hitting it with the Agrilian Earth, and I was pretty much happy with where that was. Set it aside, allow it to dry, which about like an hour later. Have all these really nice little cracks, especially in the front there. It looks really nice. On the sides there, you can see it kind of cracks up the little detail. I wasn't worried about that. We're going to jump back in with the XV88, and this is just simply to reestablish a solid color on the rim of the base. And I do apply 2 coats here. The first one is a fairly, not heavy coat, but it's just undiluted paint, and I pretty much apply it over on the rim. And then of course I use a little bit of water to thin the color out ever so slightly, and then do another layer just to smooth out so that you don't get too heavy a brush stroke. Of course, we applied like quite a few layers there to just get that rim, but that's fine. And with that done, that is the base, and that's finally, we're ready to assemble this model. There are a few other little details that need to be finished on the model, and I've been taking care of those in the Getting Projects Done video series, which is kind of a long format, so check those out if you need to know how all these other things are done, and stay tuned for when we work on assembling this guy. Big thank you to all my patrons. Without their support, these videos would not be possible. If you're considering Patreon support, click the link in the description below. And a huge thank you to everybody who does. Take care of those brushes, and they will take care of you.